Hi, this is Kimberly. So we're at the courthouse in Covington, Georgia, where the trial of Chris McNabb and Cortney Bell is drawing to a close. The date of today's testimony we're about to view is Tuesday, May 14th, 2019. This is part 2 of Basics. Attorney Robert Frost will be presenting closing arguments on behalf of Cortney Bell, and I'm also going to show a video at the end that Court TV made. Thank you to all that have hung in here with me through the trial. I know some of you are bored to tears, but I'll be done with this soon. So, if you are following it, you've most likely just finished listening to Anthony Carter, Chris McNabb's attorney. He pulled himself together after Judge Ott humiliated him in front of the courtroom and in front of a live stream going out to hundreds of thousands of people. Anyway, Miss Son and Judge Ott have both been a bit rude, if you ask me. Disrespectful to those I guess they feel that are beneath them. Not to mention the way they treated Megan Sorrells. That was horrible. I don't like that.
No.
You don't recall saying that?
No, I remember you saying that because I had never known that or heard that.
Please don't use they repeatedly because I don't know who they are. She's talked about 3 people. They can include 3 people or 4 people. So use names.
Courtney and Chris. And went to the hospital.
With the same kid?
No.
And you understand you're under oath, and if you lie under oath, you'll be charged with perjury. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I never said that was Shane Kidd. I learned that in the office that day. You told me that.
Okay.
I heard
Stop with they. Who's they?
I don't know why I keep doing that.
Well, I want you to stop.
No, Rissa was with me.
They said, where was Rissa at this time?
I'm getting confused. She was with me.
I believe it's a crime of falsity, Judge.
Also, with the way Investigator Alexander just went off on Courtney, but he didn't do the same to Chris.
Was it or was it not your fault? The house was not in good shape. How many times did he hit you when you were pregnant with that child? How many times did he encourage you to do drugs when you were pregnant with that child? How many times did you kick him out? Call the police on him? How many times did you lie for him? How many times did you sit in this room right here and lie?
For me to admit that I used drugs and that he fucking hit me.
You can prove by your very own admission that you have some culpability in the deprivation of that child, the cruelty and the environment that both of those kids were in. There was violence in the home, there was drugs in the home. You know, neither of y'all worked. Not according to his dad, he didn't. He didn't work very often. I work every day. Today's Sunday, I'm working. Okay? And don't take my money and buy drugs with it instead of food and stuff for the kid. Your actions allowed this to happen. Are both of these children even his?
Yeah.
In case you've not been here before, Chris and Courtney are first cousins who had 2 children together. The youngest, Baby Caliyah, who was 15 days old, was found deceased in the woods next to and a short walk from the trailer park in which they lived. Oh yeah, and they were meth addicts. But back to the fallen tree from the previous story. I was telling about how when I was a kid, a huge tree fell in our backyard during a winter storm, and anyway, it stayed there forever and ever, and my friends and I, we would love to play on it. We would run back and forth across it. I mean, and it was that big of an attraction in the neighborhood. Kids came from all around the other subdivisions, you know, to see it, and it was... We played outside back then, and we'd do all sorts of things on it. It was a house, a car, a restaurant, a spaceship, and most of all that was really fun was the log ride at Six Flags. We'd pretend also that we were teenagers getting our first apartment. Back then, you usually moved out of your parents' house right after graduation, or when you turned 18, or, you know, somewhere about there if you got married or went off to college, and I already got away from my story. Y'all are like, what about the trial? And you're all confused. Well, check the description box below the video. It's probably there. The timestamp, I mean, that you're looking for. Check the description box below. And then again, I just veer off to the right or the left and veer. But when I was alone as a child in the backyard, I'm talking about, in case you've gotten lost, which is highly likely, I would turn away from the house in the backyard because my mother, she was always at the kitchen sink with the window over it, and she had a very large bay window with lots and lots of plants. I really liked it. She had quite the green thumb that unfortunately was not passed down to me. But now no one could hear me or really see me because I had my back to the house, and I would cuss like a Marine sergeant. No one could hear me and no one could see me, and well, I wanted to try out all those words that I heard my parents say to each other in the middle of the night. Before going inside for dinner, I would always silently apologize to Santa Claus and to God. One day I heard a boy say, "What are you doing?" Oh my God, I almost fell out. My face turned so red that it hurt. And I just took off running. And my clumsy ass, it was one of those where you trip and you do that slow motion thing with your feet and legs feeling like they're just twisting and tying up together and tangling all before you hit the ground. Then you just drop like a hardened criminal. You just drop like a rock or something on the hardened hot summer drought Georgia clay. I gave myself some serious looking scratches and kind of burn-like things. Probably should have gone to the doctor or the emergency room or something. But you had to be pretty bad off back then to go. Because it was if you did go, then word would spread, subdivision to subdivision. Did you hear? So-and-so went to the emergency room. But these scratches, they were long on my thigh, my right thigh. I still have a little bit of scarring from it, but as I grew older, you could hardly tell. But it took weeks to heal. But I went inside and hid in my room instead of telling my mother. I snuck off to the bathroom, cleaned it real good, flushed any trace evidence of anyone having been bleeding or anything. Back in those days, they weren't these low-flow toilets. You could flush anything. And we did, because we didn't have garbage disposals either. So after cleaning up the crime scene, waited everyone until dinner. And I wore pants for weeks, even though it was summer. And I'm like, how could you have been so stupid? I didn't care about the fall. I was scared that someone heard me cussing like a Marine sergeant. That boy's voice that was on the other side of the backyard fence, he was in my class. We rode the bus together. I expected the entire bus to know about my dirty deed, done dirt cheap. I avoided eye contact with him days, weeks, and I hated myself for days on end. I jumped out of my skin every time our telephone rang at home. I expected my brothers to find out. Anyway, I kept waiting for the sledgehammer to come down on me, but it never did. It was so nerve-wracking. And Mike, the boy that on the other side of the fence, never said anything about it. We played together occasionally, still after that, as we did before, and we never talked about it. And I guess he never told his mother, who was also my piano teacher. Oh my God, the fear that she would call my mother. She would not hesitate to call my mother when she could tell I had not been practicing. So imagine if she got this dirt on me. Call up my mother and say she's not practicing. She's just sitting there like she's never had a piano lesson in her life. Then there would be drama at home and hell to pay and the nagging. And I was made to play piano, and the whole time my mom would be preparing dinner. And my parents went into debt for this piano that I did not want to play. My mother had this vision of me for herself that I didn't want to participate in. She always wanted me to do dumb shit like put on a concert, a Christmas concert, playing the piano. Like, are you kidding? No. She also wanted me to play when company came over, but I was forced into it a time or two. Me and my brothers were made to put on a Christmas pageant. And my oldest brother, he was pretending like he was a Hollywood director. Take two, and all this bullshit. God, I hated it. She was still nagging me about shit I did as a stupid kid when I was in my 40s. She would still bring up little shit that I did, like cussing and you broke this, you didn't come home on time, just remember when you lost this or such and such, or you refused, so on and so forth and what have you. Sneaking a little bit of vodka. Well, then finally I reached a point in my life where I was like, here, let me file those papers right here under fuck it. Just shit in a bucket. Look at me prattling on like a locomotive, like Attorney Carter's little red choo-choo that done jumped the track. Let's get back to the trial, shall we? Yes, indeed we will. Much love and peace. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Frost?
Please, court. Counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. I want to thank you for your service here on behalf of Ms. Bell and myself and everybody. As I said in my opening, you are a critical element, if not the most critical element, in our criminal justice system. And without you, it simply doesn't work. I want to thank you also for clearly being engaged throughout this trial. It was evident, and that's all we can ever ask for as trial lawyers. So I appreciate that, as does my client. In opening, I just want to revisit that briefly. It was short, fairly short. I asked you to do a few things. I remember my client was shrouded with the presumption of innocence, which she still is. And I hope that you will find that she remains that way after your deliberations. I also asked you if you would remember reasonable doubt, and we'll go over that in just a minute. And I think Mr. Carter kind of parsed out some of the important pieces of that, and I'll go over them again because they are very much worth mentioning. The state does have the burden on all of this, and I too feel that they have not met that burden, and I'll give you many reasons why. The most important thing that I want to go over and that I asked you to do was keep a notepad, and I hope you did it. A column, divide it down the middle, and I suspect that the side for the state probably has a great many things that you put down. If there is on the other side, the defense side, questions, or I don't want to say points because that's not what this is about. But if there are things that you felt were in favor of the defense, if there is only one thing, I don't care if there's 500 million on the left side for the state. If you have one, and that one question leaves any of your minds wavering, unsettled, wanting more, that's reasonable doubt. And you must acquit in that occasion. And I hope that the same diligence that you gave out here receiving the evidence, you will take back there into your deliberations. I hope that you will discuss with your fellow jurors, hey, I have this thought. I did what Mr. Frost asked, and I have this comment written down. What do y'all think about it? Can we engage in this? And you all have a charge, and by law should do that. You're not to surrender any of your opinions for congeniality or speed or efficiency. This is their lives. You must deliberate every issue. And all of you, not some of you, must be convinced that every single element has facts that you can say that has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Carter went over a lot of things that I'll probably maybe touch on a little bit because, as you know, they were very different cases. And I'll thoroughly explain that in a moment. But as far as his argument goes, I could not agree more. There are some really serious holes in the state's case. And they will try to just pack this together and say, he did it, she set the table, boom, done, call it a day, let's go home. It's just not that simple, folks. We don't even know. And it's certainly not an open and shut case that Mr. McNabb even did it. We have all kinds of questions about that. And I'm not going to get into, this is obviously, I represent Ms. Bell. It's between Ms. Zahn and Mr. Carter and you as to Mr. McNabb's fate. But I will say this. There are some serious holes in the investigation. There are some serious questions that I'm left with. Among them are, well, who did it? When was it done? How was it done? These are things, this is not my, just making this up. These are facts that we don't know. No one can say when this happened. We have no murder weapon. And Mr. Carter's right, we don't have a motive. What on earth would ever possess anybody, whether it be Mr. McNabb, Mr. Kidd, Mr. whoever, to do what was done to that baby? I think that's the one thing I said in opening that every single one of us in this room would agree. This is one of the most heinous crimes I've ever been a part of, or seen, heard about. But what would possess anyone to do that? They have offered nothing, no reasoning whatsoever that he's been a domestic violence abuser. Well, there are many people who do that. They don't often go off and do what was done to Baby Caliyah, and I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't think it's necessary to keep reminding everybody of what did happen. It was horrible enough. But where did it happen? It's not likely it took place in the trailer. And if you do believe Mr. McNabb is the one who did it, he says that he went outside at some point. So did it happen inside, outside? We don't know these things. And it's not just one thing we don't know, it's many things. And then we get to the investigation. And Mickey Kitchens, I applaud him. He did not do what I get so frustrated with when I'm trying to get an answer that is patently clear and the witness will not answer it. He said to Mr. Carter, you know what, I made a mistake. Good for him. Because there's not a person in this room, not one, who has not made mistakes. And if there is somebody who's thinking to themselves, I've never made a mistake, they're living and swimming in a river in Egypt. Denial. Because we've all made them. And we know it. Some are horrifying. Some might be, well, I accidentally parked in a parking space I shouldn't have parked in. The point is, he was man enough and a professional enough, more importantly, to say he should have done this. When Mr. Carter said, what if you were on trial? Wouldn't you want this done? You bet I would. You bet I would. So Mr. Carter made some incredibly good points. As far as one thing I do disagree with him is he said, we don't know what the state's going to argue. I know exactly what they're going to argue. They're going to argue he did it, and she set the table to let it happen. That's as simple as it gets, because that's a nice little package. That's like when you go to Kroger and you buy boneless, skinless chicken breasts. You don't have to go out and get your hands dirty, cut the head off the chicken, and pluck its feathers and rip it apart, gut it, and do it. You just go in there and you buy a nice little sanitized plastic wrap dinner. It's easy. It's so easy, folks. But it's not, because that's not how we work. We don't just rush to judgment. I'm sorry to borrow that phrase, but it's been used because it's true. We complete our investigation. We run down every lead. The theory is it is better for one guilty person to go free, 10 guilty people to go free than one innocent person ever spend a day in prison. That's our theory. That's what makes us who we are in this country. And that is all you need to concern yourselves with. If the state didn't prove it, it isn't your fault. So you don't need to say, God, you know what? Dang, I don't feel good about this, but we got to rectify the situation somehow. So let's err on the side of caution. That would be not only violating your moral obligation, but it would be violating the charges that you are going to get from the court. And I know y'all don't want to do that. So, where to go with this? So much. Let's talk a little bit about reasonable doubt. And I'll be very brief about this because Mr. Carter did go over it. But reasonable doubt is a doubt for which a reason can be given arising from consideration of the evidence, a lack of the evidence, or a conflict in the evidence. If, considering the facts and circumstances of this case, your minds are wavering, unsettled, unsatisfied, that is a doubt of the law, and you must acquit. Hope that you will take those words to heart because they are critical. If you are sitting there thinking to yourself, I don't know, that's it right there. Stop. You're done. That's it. You must acquit. It's important that we get into this legal part of it. You are going to hear it, but you're going to hear it in a 35, 40-minute recitation from the court, all bundled all together. And so it's important that you know these things and that I spell them out to you. Not that I think that you're not smart enough to do that, but it's hard when you've got 40 minutes of just reading to catch everything. Now, I don't know what the response from the state will be. That I don't know. I know that they're probably behind me feverishly writing, both of them or all of them, about what they're going to say about how dumb I am and how this is just ludicrous. I noticed they were doing the same thing with Mr. Carter, and there may be colorful metaphors and, other examples that this is like this and this is like that and, blah, blah, blah. I'm the one in denial and who knows? I don't know what'll happen. But that's really none of my business. That isn't going to change. And again, I hate to keep agreeing with I don't hate to agree with him, but again, agreeing with Mr. Carter, that's the facts that we have. And he's right about another thing. This I want, while you're listening to me, please consider. This is the last time that I will get to speak to you, just like it was for Mr. Carter. The state, right or wrong, gets the opportunity to speak to you last. They get to sift through every single thing we've said and try to find a way to knock it back and bring you back into the fold and tell you how crazy we are and tell you that we're throwing out things like red herrings and, putting, trying to put smoke in the air so that you'll be confused. That's not what I'm doing. In fact, we're going to go through their evidence. So you won't have to it won't have to be my interpret my words. It'll be their own people's words, what they said, what they failed to say, what they proved, what they didn't prove. And that's what you need to pay attention to. Not me. I mean, well, I hope you pay attention to what I'm saying because I'm trying to put it all together for you. But so there. Well, let's look at what Ms. Bell is charged with. She is charged, and count one, with murder in the second degree. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this particular charge we can't even get to unless you find her guilty of count two, because it requires that she be in the commission of cruelty to children in the second degree by causing Caliyah McNabb cruel and excessive physical pain through infliction upon her of a blunt force trauma to the head. So, unless you find count two, there is no count one. And I hope you'll understand all this. This is a bit confusing. It's some of these charges are a little, well, I'd say they're kind of bootstrapped together, but that's just the way it is. So, and first of all, let me say this: if you find that someone else did this, other than their claim that Mr. McNabb did this, then there is no case against Miss Bell, period. Because nothing that they proved would account for an accident or any of the other evidence that Mr. Carter put up, or I'm sorry, that during his cross-examinations, or any other. If anybody else did it, that's it. We're done. You can just take Ms. Bell's and toss it out the window. So, but getting back to it, count one really is irrelevant unless you find count two. And what is count two? Cruelty to children in the second degree. For that, on one specific day, 7th day of October, the day the child went missing, that she, with criminal negligence, and I want to read what criminal negligence is. Let me read the charge first. With criminal negligence, caused Caliyah McNabb, child under the age of 18, cruel and excessive physical pain through the infliction upon her of blunt force trauma to the head. Well, what is criminal negligence? That is an act or failure to act which demonstrates willful. There is no willfulness in this case with regard to her. Wanton or reckless disregard for the safety of others who might reasonably be expected to be injured thereby. Now let's talk about that. A reasonable expectation. I'm going to argue vehemently, as strongly as I can, that under any circumstances, whether she'd been beaten, whether she had used drugs, whether he cheated on her, under any circumstances, how do you reasonably expect from what you've been given that someone is going to take your infant and do what was done to that child that you saw in those autopsy photos? Who can reasonably expect that? She didn't. She absolutely couldn't even believe it. You saw hours of tapes where she literally says, I don't understand this. Obviously there was a lot of tears, a lot of emotion, and I'll spare you that reenactment. But she was blown away. And we all watch the news. I mean, domestic violence is no, it's not like this is the first, oh my God, this is domestic violence. I've never even heard of that before. We see it on TV daily. High government officials, athletes, performers, and it doesn't come out for months and months and months and months. I wonder, do any of those people think that someone might just go completely savagely insane and do something like that to their children? I'd submit to you the answer is absolutely not. There was an intervening cause here. I don't know who. And that, again, I'm not getting into that fight. What I do know is there was an intervening cause here far greater than, say, a mother who has 3 kids between the ages of 1 and 4 and a pool, a 20-foot deep pool in the backyard, and she just ignores them for hours and hours and hours. Drowning seems kind of likely. Or if you want to let your child go swimming in the ocean where people are chumming for sharks, well, there's a good chance since there's tons of blood in the water, that's probably a bad idea. This is not that situation. This is not at all that situation. Because she was beaten, because she did drugs, she's supposed to know that him or anyone else would do that, commit that heinous crime, beat an infant so savagely that her teeth came through her tongue, lips, that she's unrecognizable. And again, we don't even know what happened there. We have no motive. They can't establish one. They haven't even offered one. Not even a glimpse of one. So how is she supposed to know? The answer is she didn't. At all. Count 3 is contributing to the deprivation of a minor because allegedly on this date, this isn't just like all the time, okay? You got to remember, these are specific dates. This child went missing on October 7th, 2017. That she allegedly willfully failed to provide proper parental care or control for Caliyah. I'm going to stop there because there's a lot of ands in this one. And when there's a lot of ands, that means every single thing needs to be proven. Failed to provide proper parental care. The child was sleeping by every account, and so was my client. She took roughly 4 to 4.5 hours to sleep. 4 to 4.5 hours. I get it. She's an infant. I've had many kids. Well, I haven't. My wife has. But those moments when you finally get a newborn to get a couple hours of sleep, and you fall asleep so that you're not sleep deprived, that doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you failing to provide proper parental care. No. I think if we put our common sense hats on, we'll all realize that we've probably all taken, with newborns, young children, infants, we've taken that time to sleep when we can, when they're sleeping. And as far as she knew, that child was sleeping. She said to Chris, go check on the baby. It wasn't as if she was asleep for 24 hours, or she was missing from the house, or she just didn't care, or she was knocked out cold. She went to bed at 5:30 a.m. and she was up and calling 911 at, I believe it was 10:32. That is hardly failing to provide proper parental care. But in addition to having to prove that, they have to prove that she failed to provide said child with adequate supervision necessary for such child's well-being. Said act, in the failure to do that, the act, apparently, and I'll use the same argument. There was no failed supervision. She was down the hall. She was sleeping. Mom had a couple of hours to sleep. She took it. That does not make her a murderess or set the table for a murder in any way, shape, or form. And that resulted in her being a deprived child. There's a lot of people out there who are going to be in a lot of trouble if that's the new state of the law. And of course, then it goes into in accordance with Code Section 1511.2 of the Official Code of Georgia. But yet there's another and. And that act or failed to act. Well, they say that act, so we'll go with that. Resulted in the death of the child. No. No, I'll tell you what resulted in the death of the child. Someone taking that child and inflicting such unbelievable force, whether it be a fist or, as the ME said, a boot or a heavy object, over and over and over, to inflict such incredible damage that it caused death. It wasn't my client sleeping for 4 hours. And let me say something else. I've got a lot more to say, actually. But my client getting beat up did not cause this child's death. My client even using those drugs on the occasion she did. Child didn't ingest any of them. That didn't cause the child's death. Her being cheated on, her living in a mobile home, did not cause that child's death. And last I checked, living in mobile homes, coming from an abysmal socioeconomic life or demographic, being beaten, and not reporting it as she probably should have done, those aren't illegal. They're not. Because that's the smoke and mirrors they want you to believe. What caused that child's death is, simply put, according to the indictments, blunt force trauma to the head. And you saw it. That's what caused the death. And there has not been one shred of evidence that suggests that my client, Miss Bell, did anything to harm that child. So as much as they want to pack on for how horrible a mother she is, she didn't cause that child's death. And they're going to say, well, she set the table. She set out the steak knives for a steak dinner, and somebody at that dinner table picked one up and stabbed the person next to him. How is that her fault? It's not. It's the crazy person sitting there that picked up the steak knife or the wine glass or the plate or whatever they used and smashed it over their head or stabbed them or did whatever. That's who killed Caliyah McNabb, not my client. But the mother can't go. It couldn't just be dad in this situation, because they really don't know. And they weren't taking any chances as a state. Taking any chances here so they just accused them all. Made up what they could. There is no bright line test that I could find on what is reckless disregard or any of that stuff. You folks will be making the decision in this case. Not every case or any future or past, whatever cases, this case. It'll be up to you to make that decision. But I submit to you that as far as her indictment, There just isn't anything there. Ms. Zahn's going to argue it, and she will do a good job, I'm sure, saying that if this, then that, and but for this. Well, guess what? That's not how we operate. There's a whole lot of what ifs and but fors that could prevent a million tragedies. But we don't blame everybody. You know, what if somebody had done something aboard the planes in 9/11? I don't know. Then, you know, if they lived, then should we blame them? No. No, we shouldn't. It was the people who hijacked them and ran them into buildings. That's who we blame. That's who we hold accountable. My client got up. She called 911. Well, first she called her father. Did you come get the baby? Did you, because there was some discussion about that. She kept hoping and hoping Caliyah would be found, because all she knew was that she had gone missing. She asked detective investigator Alexander, the lead investigator, can I have your number? Can you update me? Have you found it? Have the dogs found anything? Have you found anything? She had no idea. I mean, I hope this part of my argument is you're saying to yourself, yeah, I got all that. But in case you're not, she stayed interested. There was no complicity. Well, we'll get to that. Bear with me just a moment, folks. Well, there's a few more charges I want to go over with you. You're also going to hear charges about intent. Again, I've made my arguments on the indictments, but intent is an essential element of any crime, must be proved by the state beyond a reasonable doubt. You're going to hear that. You're going to hear that there is no presumption of any criminal intent. The defendant will not be presumed to have acted with any criminal intent. You're going to hear things about guilt by mere association by a person with other persons involved in the commission of a crime, if in fact he did have anything to do with it, which again, like I said, I'm not involved in that. Without more, will not authorize a jury to find such person guilty of consent in or concurrence in the commission of the crime, unless the evidence shows beyond a reasonable doubt that such person helped in the actual perpetration of the crime or participated in the criminal endeavor. Then you've got something called mere presence at the scene of the crime. Basically what this means is that my client being associated with him, my client being in the trailer, does not make her guilty, no matter how hard they're going to try to tell you she set the table, she did this, if not for this, then that, and whatever arguments she's going to come up with. Grave suspicion. Facts and circumstances which merely place upon the defendant a grave suspicion of the crime charged, or that merely raise speculation or conjecture of the defendant's guilt, are not sufficient to authorize conviction of the defendant. That is a very important charge. And I hope you listen clearly. I won't reread it a dozen times, but grave suspicion, it's not enough. I can't stress these things enough. The burden is incredibly high for them. She's going to say, well, it's not a mathematical certainty. It's not this, that, or the other thing. No, it's not. But it's so high that if you're wavering, unsettled, dissatisfied, or have grave suspicion or speculation or conjecture, you can't find her guilty by law. If you want to disobey that, I can't help that. But that will be the law you're read. Not that I think that it's going to be that close. I hope. In a minute, I want to go through exactly what evidence did come out. I just don't want to miss anything that just going over again the situation. Please remember, the medical examiner, she did the autopsy. I think there was probably 2 or 3 critical elements, definitely 2. One was that there was no sign of any previous abuse. The other was that she reviewed the pediatric records from like the Thursday before. Just a couple, that had occurred just prior to her death. The child was fine. The child was in good health. You heard that from just about everybody. And the state brought that out. This child was fine. To show, I guess in their effort to try to, convict Mr. McNabb, to show that it wasn't some, to exclude the possibility of she might have been sick or whatever. So the point being, the child was fine. Well, what does that tell you? Clarissa, she's fine. And she was fine, and she's 2. So that kind of flies and contradicts their argument about my client being so bad and her situation being so bad that this should have been seen a mile away. And again, I don't think anyone would have seen this coming. And again, whatever drugs she did and however many, times she did them, the only thing that really matters is what happened on that particular day. And on that particular day, they were whatever she did, however little she did, was so bad that she was able to do what she had to do. Bless you. And she stayed up with the baby until 5:30. The baby didn't die of the drugs that my client did. The baby didn't die of any previous beatings that my client sustained. The baby didn't die over my client sleeping for 4.5 hours. Again, we know how that baby died. We saw how that baby died. And may she rest in peace, but it wasn't right. That's simple as it is. It was heartbreaking. My client is guilty of one thing. She is guilty of being a foolhardy, almost, and that's putting it politely, very foolish young woman who thought she was in love and who has no idea what love is. Love is not being in love. Love is not caring about somebody who is literally doesn't care about you more than they care about a car, or their kids more than they care about a PT Cruiser. And you heard those tapes and her begging. She wanted a nuclear family. She wanted what she didn't have. Her father did the best he could, but that's tough. That's real tough. She didn't even know who her mother was until she was a teenager. And unfortunately, that led to the situation between these two, which they didn't even know about until after they were seeing each other. But none of that even really matters. We're here about Caliyah. But the point is, my client foolishly, naively thought she was going to fix a person who is serially cheating, didn't care about her at all, as per every action just about that he took. She didn't know. You saw how, and I'm not trying to disparage people of lower socioeconomic levels or income levels, but you were out there. You saw how folks out there live. They don't have the same norm that many of us do. Many of the things that we think of as obvious aren't obvious to them. Out there, even in some of the churches, they advise, well, you stay and you work your problems out with domestic violence. Oh, he's a drinker? Well, then you pray for his soul. Because divorce is a sin. I mean, they weren't married, but the point being, they have children together. You stay together. Or, in her case, you just have no guidance whatsoever and you do the best you can. But you heard how many times she said, you know, Daddy, that's what she called him, Daddy, please come home, please come home. She was just a fool. She was a fool to ever think she was going to have a nuclear family with him. That I will give you. But that is all she's guilty of. She never wanted anything to happen to her kids, and she never thought in a million years that their father, if he even did it, could do something like that. She never, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, the reasonable expectations. And you see that in some of those tapes, when she starts hearing things and seeing things online, she takes a phone call from him and she gives him the what for. Big time. Did you do this? There's no other explanations. Now, I'm not saying there isn't other explanations. I'm simply saying what she said. But she starts, asking all those right questions, which evidence is to you, since you heard her. She didn't want anything to happen to this child or her other child. And nothing did happen to the other child, which begs other questions. Why would you harm one child instead of both? Or all four of them, for that matter? Or everybody? And if it was him, how about all three? I don't know. But that's just it. We don't know. But I get distracted. So let's focus back on these counts, this criminal negligence, and this disregard, reckless disregard. She didn't see any of this coming. That's all there is to it. Was she stupid for loving this man? Probably, yes. And she's probably behind me right now making some sort of face that isn't real happy about being called that. But the point is, because she was in a bad relationship, Ms. Zahn's going to tell you that bad relationship where she suffered domestic abuse, but the children didn't. There's been no evidence whatsoever that either of those children did. So if she wanted to take that, I think it's crazy. You all may think it's insane. We might all think it's stupid and crazy and unbelievable. But it's obviously rampant. Here in the United States, we have a whole month devoted to domestic violence. It isn't something that just happens here or, in sporadic times. It's all over. It's an epidemic. So, again, well, some other things I want to point out, kind of along the lines of the investigation. I don't know that it really particularly matters, but my client was let's see exactly what. A lot of witnesses. Gary Morgan, person put on what I thought was a most entertaining and amazing technological 3D look at the trailer. Stated, my client was 33.529 feet. It's pretty exact. From the location where Caliyah was sleeping. also said that there was 3 walls, 1, 2, 3, between where my client was and the baby. Now keep in mind the baby was also sleeping really close to a wall unit AC. I don't know, we don't know whether it was on or off. We just don't. It's Georgia. It could have been 100 degrees out that night or 50. But we don't know. But if it was running, a wall unit in a trailer, I'm guessing there could have been banging and rattling and all kinds of racket going on back there. The 2-year-old didn't wake up to it. You know, so again, this goes back to, should my client have known? No. No. Again, there is nothing wrong with getting a few hours of sleep while your infant is sleeping, or your newborn or toddler or whatever. Parents are allowed to sleep. Now, granted, you don't get much when you got little kids, but we're not talking about 6, 8, 10, 14, 18, 24 hours. 4 to 4.5 hours. That's it. But the state's going to try to extrapolate that out, like they will with everything. My client, there's no evidence. My client was so strung out on drugs that night that even if she were sober, she could have had any idea that any of this went on. That's what you need to think about. Because that's not how they're going to bring it out. They're going to be like, it was doing the drug, they package it all up, like I said, like that nice plastic wrap set of chicken breasts. Doing drugs, getting beat up. She clearly saw this coming. No. So what do we have? Let's go through. 911 operator was the first witness, and that was my client calling, because she worried sick about her kids, obviously. Tim Bell, he did have quite a bit to say, and he pulled no punches. But he did say he'd never seen my client abuse her children, or even that he had ever seen the children abused, period. And that she wasn't a loving and affectionate mother. I mean, did she have problems? Sure, she did. And like Mr. Carter said, we made that known from the beginning. That's why halfway through this trial, I started thinking, gosh, I got to find something to say to half these witnesses other than no questions. But it didn't apply. I didn't have questions for people when they were talking about with these 20 maps over here, you know, where was this and how did this happen? My client wasn't charged with any of that. And I hope you all understand that. If not, that's, well, I don't want to take all the blame, but I went through the indictment to let you know my client isn't charged in any way, shape, or form with committing the act. Just with, however they're going to phrase it, setting a table, which, of course, I've gone through, and I hope that you are on the same page with me on that. He confirms, yeah, she called me, and then I told her, get off the phone right away, call 911. Johnny Evans, owner of the mobile home park, wasn't much there. He owned the mobile home. And this, again, is for my defense, not necessarily for the co-defendant. There's another 911 operator. She wanted her kids back. She was having a little back and forth with her father. Understandable. It had to do with the fact that, surprise, surprise, Tim Bell did not really approve of Mr. McNabb. I wonder why. Well, if you're a father, and you know your daughter's getting beaten on and living over there, and that's with him, with what was going on and all the shadiness and whatever, I'm pretty sure you're going to be upset. And you're probably going to take the car back. And you're probably going to question, as I asked him, why are you paying for everything? Good question. Wish I knew that myself. But they're my grandkids, and I'm not going to let them suffer. So there were problems there. We're not going to, that doesn't, again, that doesn't make my client guilty of these charges. Not even a little bit. Derek Bartlett. He answered the custodial interference call. Now this is one where he came out and he said, maybe we should do this as a, work this out, instead of anybody going to jail or whatever. And my client agreed. And the kids ended up going with their dad that night. I'm sorry, with her father, Tim Bell. Yes, sir. Megan Sorrells, again, she said they were always, that Cortney kept them always fed, clean, brought supplies, etc. And also that when they were having problems, there were several witnesses, and I'll try to condense some of these, that said, yes, when they were having the problems, Cortney would lean on us. That's a responsible act. If you're going to have the problems, take advantage of your family. And folks, I could go on and on, but I think I've covered a lot of this. So I'll leave you with this. You know those charges. I've gone over them. I've discussed why I believe my client is not guilty of these. And I'll ask you, to go back in there, deliberate, discuss all this, and I will ask you to return a verdict of not guilty on all counts as to Cortney Bell. And please remember the intricacies of that, of what I've said. I don't know what the state's going to rebut with, but please understand one thing. Nothing my client did caused that death. We all know, all of you know, what caused that child's death. And it's nothing that my client did or could have prevented. She had every right to keep her kids. There's no way that she could have seen an intervening cause like whoever did that to the child, whether it be Mr. McNabb or anybody else. And if it wasn't Mr. McNabb, there's definitely no way. And again, if it wasn't Mr. McNabb, then there's nothing for you to even consider. It's not guilty, not guilty, not guilty for my client. Very simple. So please, try your best to remember what I've gone over. At least consider my arguments and my position on this on behalf of Ms. Bell. I thank you again for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
This time we're going to take a morning recess for a short period. Y'all go back into the jury room. Don't discuss this case while you're back there.
Hey guys, I forgot to mention, following the court TV news clip that I was going to show you, it's about 4.5 minutes. Following that is video from when the jurors actually went out to the trailer park in the woods next to it, and they walked the path where Baby Caliyah was found. So I thought it was kind of interesting, gave you a little bit more clarity. However, it still doesn't help answer who did it and how. Hope you have a great day. Much love and peace.
My 2-week-old is not in her sleeper. Her passy is on the floor.
A mother's desperate 911 call from inside this Georgia home, 40 miles southeast of Atlanta.
She's not in her sleeper. She's not here. I've looked everywhere.
15-day-old Caliyah McNabb, home just days ago from the hospital, is missing. The 911 operator keeps Caliyah's mother, Cortney Bell, on the phone. Cortney explains that she and the baby's father, Christopher McNabb, just woke up.
Then I told my baby's dad to go check on Caliyah, and then he's talking about she's not here. She's not in here.
You looked through everything, like under the bed,
yes,
in the
ma'am.
bathroom?
Yes, ma'am. And I have clothes and totes, but I've looked all in them, and she's not here.
A search is immediately launched by local law enforcement, with friends, neighbors, and volunteers joining in.
People were setting up and trying to get a uniform search party and getting maps out and marking areas that had been searched and think places where people need to go.
As night falls, with still no sign of Caliyah, her father makes an emotional plea for help.
But I want my kid back, man. That's my child, man. I want my kid, man.
The next morning, in this wooded area adjacent to the family's mobile home park, searchers make a heartbreaking discovery. Caliyah's body, wrapped in men's clothing inside a gym bag, is found buried under a log and brush.
This community was devastated. This community was wrapping its arms around that child. Once the body was found, a memorial was set up minutes later.
After learning that his daughter's body has been found, Christopher McNabb immediately flees. An arrest warrant is quickly issued, and McNabb, last seen getting out of the car along this Georgia highway, is now the subject of a manhunt.
County 911, was that just a severe emergency? That guy that his baby was found dead is in the Chevron on 36.
Just after 7 o'clock that night, 3 miles from the family home at this convenience store, McNabb surfaces. Surveillance video shows him buying a beer, then turning around and talking to the customers in line.
He was apparently acting hostile during that whole situation, so I can only imagine how scary that was for the people, because all they've seen is this man's accused of the absolute worst, and he's standing right here in the gas station with me.
A few hours later, Christopher McNabb is in a jail cell, a familiar place for the 27-year-old with a long criminal history dating back more than 10 years. This time, he's charged with first-degree murder. Then, 3 months after the murder, Caliyah's mother, Cortney Bell, is also in front of a judge answering for her alleged role in Caliyah's death.
Count 1, murder in the second degree. Count 2, cruelty to children in the second degree. And count 3, contributing to the deprivation of a minor felony.
While we may never know what baby Caliyah truly endured during her short life, we do know that Cortney Bell admitted to Newton County deputies that she and Christopher McNabb smoked meth the night before Caliyah's death. And something else involving police happened just days before she died that, looking back, could have saved her life.
Right now, you have the baby right now?
I have the 2-week-old baby sitting on my kitchen table.
This 911 call is from Cortney Bell's father, Tim Bell. It was recorded 4 days before Caliyah's death.
The way I feel about it, they abandoned them youngins yesterday.
Courtney's family wanting to remove the children from their home because they were unhappy with the care. So it's devastating for me to think that any child can come into the world and have to live through a situation like that at that young of an age. It's absolutely devastating, and to think that that's all she knew in her short life.
Now, more than a year and a half after their daughter's tragic death, mother and father are sitting side by side in court as the state of Georgia seeks justice for baby Caliyah.
The vans are going to have waters. They're going to have bug spray in case somebody wants to spray themselves, because I don't know, this is a woodsy area and I just don't know what's out there. As I've already indicated, I'm going along. Each attorney's going along, just to view ourselves what transpires. This is a situation where they're going to drive out there, and you'll be taking these vans and being allowed to exit the van. We'll have one person who's Captain Kitchens, who's going to direct you about where to walk. He might point out things, I don't know what, but he'll point out whatever needs to be pointed out. But you're not to ask him questions. He can't give you anything other than just to make the sheer statement. This is so-and-so, this is so-and-so. Then once you've had an adequate time to view the spatial distances and everything and kind of put it together, we'll come back and get back in the vans and come back up here.
Let's roll that video. We're watching this for the first time together.
Oh, wow.
This is the actual view. So again, you're not going to see the jurors' faces, but we can see that they're walking and where they're going. This was the jury view where they returned to they're walking around the mobile home where Caliyah lived, and now it looks like they're heading towards that area in the woods. And as they go around, you can see that main road back there, Ted.
Yeah, it was a little difficult to get some perspective, but yeah, it's fascinating that we're seeing this
And the area was actually cordoned off by security.
There's the log.
There's the log.
There's the log. So apparently this is the log that covered the depression in the ground where baby Caliyah was discarded in a bag wrapped in a blanket and a shirt.
But it's not that hard to conceal anything there. It's pretty plain view.
No. Again, folks, the video you're looking at just in, this is the video of the jury who visited the scene of the crime, visited the home that baby Caliyah lived in with her 2-year-old sister and her mom and her dad. And this is the wooded area where her remains were found one day after she was reported missing by her mother. And a tough, tough day for that jury, folks. Really difficult.
But I don't have a good side, so don't be trying to hang with yourself around. They're both equally bad.
Probably right here.
Come on up here and talk to him. Okay. I'm going to orchestrate this. Yeah, Mr. Now you can get down there and dig it out a little bit if you want.
I can't help that.
You can handle it.